I opened it, and what seemed like a platoon of Toronto police rushed in, both two-legged and four-legged. They found a $25 bag of juggy. Surprise, surprise! Surprise, surprise! Oh, my life, be waiting for you. No, how you do. That encounter with Big John shocked me out of the life. The thought of what might have gone down in that brownstone was enough to make me get my head straight and refocus on my career. Yeah, so selling pussy wasn't Natalie Cole's forte. She was in the business for a second until she met Big John. Ain't nobody trying to be in that room with Big John. So now she's working in the studio with Marvin Yancey and Chuck Jackson. Marvin and Chuck hadn't much formal training, but they'd had a modestly successful group that they sang in together in Chicago called The Independents. The group had recorded one album, but they were really more interested in writing and producing. The moment I met them, I felt like they knew what they were doing and something good could happen. They had a very original and distinctive sound, and their whole approach, whether it was to music or composition, was just what I needed. Chicago's very innovative. Say what you want to, but they are the creators of that drill music. That's for the young people to know, and us old people to find out after it ain't even important no more. But like Chief Keef and King Von. I was proud of the tape when we were done. Kevin sent copies to major labels such as Columbia, RCA, and Motown. I tried not to be crushed when the answer came back, thanks, but no thanks. Ironically, the biggest interest came from Capitol, a man by the name of Larkin Arnold, who'd started out in the Capitol legal department, had just been brought over to the creative side and named as head of the new R&B division at the label. Because he knew of Chuck and Marvin from their work with the Independents, he fished our demo out of the pile and liked what he heard. I thought it was a kick that out of all the record companies, Capitol was the last one I wanted to go with, because I just knew they were going to be shoving my dad down my throat. Capitol had been Dad's label, the house that Nat built. Larkin hardly even mentioned him, and often told me and the press that he would have signed me even if my name had been Smith. Have you heard? This week you brought a lot of sunshine into my life. You gave me a happiness that I never knew. Larkin was well aware of how many of my father's albums were still selling and how important it was to keep that Nat King Cole legend alive. He also wanted to avoid any suggestion that Capitol was exploiting the daughter of for mere profit. But he was also sure that he had something good in the material that Chuck and Marvin and I had created. He knew it was a hard sell to executives in charge, but was willing to go the extra distance because the music turned him on. He thought that 2 songs from the demo, I Love Him So Much and You, belonged on the album, and he wanted Chuck and Marvin to write another 7 or 8 songs to complete the package. We were thrilled. So anyway, all this is going on, but the bitch can't go 1 mile without her junkie blanket. She on her way to success, but I gotta go get my junkie blanket. I'm sorry. I need the comforts of my nickel. Henry was a heroin dealer who lived on 113th Street, and we were both friends. You know, your dealer is kind of like the neighbor bartender who you can talk to about all your problems. His ex-wife, Maddie, lived across the street from Henry, and she was a pal too. The band drove to our first show in Toronto at Adam's Rib, a nightclub on the Queensway, and I was going to fly in to meet them. We would then use our beat-up Volkswagen van to drive from the gig to another. Honey, Canada is a big country. I called that old orange van Shitty Shitty Bang Bang because of all the noise it made. We had just arrived in Toronto, and I was settling into my room at the Lakeshore Boulevard Motel when there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and what seemed like a platoon of Toronto police rushed in, both two-legged and four-legged. They found a $25 bag of juggy. Surprise, surprise! Surprise, surprise! Eventually, they unearthed a little $25 bag of heroin along with my hypodermic needles and various paraphernalia from my suitcase, and I knew I was in deep shiz. To make it all a little worse, the bus came right on my birthday, February 6, 1975. One of the members of the band was with me in the room at the time, and he seemed to be in shock. In hindsight, he might have been too much in shock, and I've often wondered whether he didn't drop a dime on me. Perhaps he himself had gotten busted and then turned me in to get himself off. By the way the cops behaved, it's almost certain that someone had tipped them off that I was carrying, and I think they expected to find a lot more than they came up with. I was put in handcuffs and taken to police headquarters. Sound like the Ray Charles story to me. Well, the good news was that I wasn't headed for the slammer. The bad news was that I wasn't headed back to Chicago anytime soon. I was stuck in Canada. While I was adjusting to my new circumstances, my manager had his own part of my mess to handle. He called my mother and asked for help. She sprang into action and managed to put a blanket on media coverage. It was about damage control. Between God and a great attorney that she found, the story of my arrest never made it to the States. Couldn't happen that way today. Everything stayed under wraps except there was a small article in the Toronto press that ran in the back pages. The probation was good news from a felony standpoint, but rotten news from an album obligation to a capital standpoint. Everything was on hold while I was marooned up there. By then, I was scared straight, and feeling very alone. I hadn't had any problems with withdrawal since I hadn't been using all that much. Marvin and Chuck, of course, were understandably upset to hear that I was still up in Canada. They were anxious to get started on the new record, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. That's when my cousin Janice came into the picture. Janice was the daughter of my father's sister, Evelyn. Aunt Bay and I'd not had any real contact with her since before Dad's funeral. Janice and I had met in Los Angeles when I was about 9 or 10, and again at our Uncle Eddie's funeral. But I was desperate for someone to help who wouldn't tell my mother, and Janice was that someone. The day that I was released from my probation was the day that I got the hell out of Canada for good. I thought I was banned from entering that country for 3 more years, which was fine with me. Now let me tell you how God works. Within the next year, my first single, This Will Be, was such a big hit that the Canadian government made a special provision for me to return and give a concert for 5,000 fans. I've been coming back ever since, And Canada has become one of my favorite places in the world. Go figure. Aunt Bay was waiting for me along with cousin Pam, Janice's little sister, who was in her early teens. I was greeted like one of the long lost, which I had been, as they wrapped their arms around me. When I stepped across the threshold of that little apartment, I knew I was home. There was so much strength there, so much love, and so much safety in such a small, unpretentious place. Aunt Bay lived at 83rd and Martin Luther King Drive, right next to the Tasty Freeze ice cream stand. She was a hairdresser. Dad's side of the family didn't have a lot of money. They were just regular folks. Pam had to give up her bedroom so that I could have a place to sleep. That was quite a sacrifice to make because there were only 2 bedrooms in the house. But even if I had had the money to live elsewhere, and I didn't, they wouldn't have wanted me to be anywhere else. That's the kind of people they were. They weren't rich by any means, but they would give you the shirt off their backs. Money was always tight, and I was conscious of being an extra mouth to feed in a household where there was nothing to spare. I was growing a lot musically, not only because Chuck and Marvin were teaching me so much, but because they were writing songs specifically for me. Yeah, whoever was writing for Natalie Cole, which I find out is the dude Marvin and Chuck, they knew exactly what they was doing. They felt her when they were writing the songs. Because you know how you have some songs and you be like, damn, Janet Jackson could have sang that song. The songs that Natalie Cole sing, I believe, couldn't be sang by any other artist but Natalie Cole. Their music catered to my voice, and that made all the difference. It was through working with them that I found my true voice. It was just ridiculous how much fun we had. It was not at all like working. Janice came to love Chuck and Marvin as much as I did. She attended all our recording sessions and eventually became our spiritual advisor. After we completed the recording, Chuck and Marvin saw to it that she actually got credited as our spiritual advisor on the album. One evening, we were at Chuck's home and Larkin was with us. He said, "Look, you've got 7 or 8 really good cuts here, but we just need one more something. Maybe it should be up-tempo with a little more energy." Chuck rose from his chair and said, "I've just been working on this song." He pulled this little raggedy piece of yellow paper out of his pocket and handed it to Marvin at the piano. Marvin played a few chords of what became "This Will Be." And Larkin said excitedly, "That's it. That's exactly what we need."